the thing that I'd like to see change in the next 10 years, and I hope we see this change, we're talking about this rise of small group travel, right? But we're talking about broadly, middle class, English speaking, generally, not particularly diverse group of people going on these trips. And I would like to see that change. I would like to think in 10 years' time, our style of travel is not just open, but is a real option for people from more diverse cultures and languages.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Travel Trends. This is your host, Dan Christian, and I'm excited to continue our deep dive into the world of guided travel. And over the last couple of episodes, we've heard from Globus, we heard last week from Colette, and today we're going to hear from an adventure travel company, Explore. Now, Explore Worldwide is based in London and run by Michael Edwards, who I had the privilege to work with at G Adventures. He went on to Intrepid from there. And so he is a real adventure category expert, as you'll hear from our discussion today. And I'm really looking forward to this conversation because we've also just launched our adventure series in partnership with our friends at the Adventure Travel and Trade Association. As most of our listeners know, we did a season 4 deep dive into the world of adventure. And Shannon Stoll joined us for that first conversation. So we are producing a quarterly series together to continue to focus on the world of adventure travel. So you can find out more information about that at traveltrendspodcast.com or at adventuretravel.biz. And our first episode just went live this week to celebrate Earth Day, where we focused on sustainability and brought in the CEO of Tourism Cares, Greg Takahara. So be sure to check that one out. And then the other mention just before we kick off this next episode with Michael Edwards is that we are doing a series of spotlight episodes. And one of the things that we have heard a lot from our listeners is they want us to do even more timely and topical news content to highlight what's happening in the travel industry. And so at the beginning of each month, we're going to have a special spotlight that will kick off in May, highlighting some of the big developments that are happening across our industry and bringing various voices to those conversations. I'm certainly looking forward to bringing those to life. So this is where the feedback that we get from our listeners is incredibly valuable to shape the content. So feel free to keep those coming, and you can always email me directly, dan@traveltrendspodcast.com. So look out for some of those spotlight episodes. Of course, we also have our partnership with Forbes Travel Guide rolling out at the moment. We're just midway through our 10-part series, The Leaders Behind the Stars. So be sure to check those out every Thursday. And then we're going to continue our spotlight episodes with various executives, startups, destination spotlights. We have one coming up on Colombia shortly. And then we'll be doing this quarterly series in partnership with ATTA. And now, one other thing just to mention is that as part of our commitment to sending out updates on what's happening within the travel industry, we have incredibly valuable for our partners and our listeners to be able to make business decisions on. And one of them is with our partner, Flywire. They just published a new report on luxury travel trends. You can go to flywire.com/travel trends and then just check out their resources, look under travel for luxury travel report. And I think you'll find this immensely fascinating, especially as it relates to guided travel. And next month, we're getting into river cruising. And so there's some really valuable insights from their latest report on luxury travel. That's our friends at Flywire. So it's flywire.com/travel trends to find the luxury travel report. And then my good friend Ian Cumming, who runs Travel Massive, is also partnered with Stay 22, which is one of our continued title sponsors. And they actually just completed an incredible report on the creator economy. So huge credit to Ian and Katarina and the team at Travel Massive, working with Remy and Andrew and the team at Stay 22. This report is gold. There's so much valuable insights in here. As I saw Ian highlighted, one of the main myths it dispels is there's not just one type of creator. There's many different types of creators within travel. So the best way to find that would just be go to travelmassive.com/stay22. And you'll be able to find that report. And then, of course, we'll include links in our newsletter and on our social channels as well. Now, this episode is sponsored by our friends at Tour Optima. And as you've heard over the course of this series, I am an investor in Tour Optima. I work as an advisor closely with Ben because I'm a huge believer in this platform. So any of you that are in the day tour or multi-day tour space, if you want to delight your guests, keep them coming back, you need to introduce a white label app like Tour Optima. And there's no comparison in my mind in the marketplace today I was not able to build something like this in my time working with many multi-day tour companies. And Ben introduced me to this about 2 years ago. And instantly I realized what a significant opportunity this was, which is why I decided to get involved. And Ben kindly agreed to sponsor this guided touring series as they continue to expand with large multi-day tour global brands. So to learn more information, check out touroptima.com or email ben@touroptima.com. We'll be right back. Our longtime listeners will be very familiar with travelai.com, one of our sponsors from the very beginning. They've sponsored the last 2 seasons and also our AI Summit. You might actually remember they were recently featured in season 4, the 2 co-founders, John Leotier and Chris Jensen, live from Focusrite, where they shared how their innovative use of AI is reshaping the travel industry. If you missed it, we highly recommend going back to hear their inspiring story of building one of the fastest growing, profitable AI companies in travel, entirely bootstrapped. Travel AI is revolutionizing the industry by blending AI-powered efficiency with personalized, human-centered travel experiences. From micro-segmentation to tailored travel solutions, their mission is to enhance every traveler's journey while setting the pace for travel's future. Here's how you can join the exciting mission. If you or someone you know in tech or AI is looking for a new career that combines innovation and impact, then head to travelai.com or follow them on LinkedIn to explore more opportunities. They are growing fast. Thanks again for your continued support. Hey travelers, are you looking to book your next adventure? Then you have to meet our good friends at Flight Centre, the travel-obsessed experts ready to make your next dream trip a reality. For over 40 years, they've been opening up the world to travelers from the UK, Australia, New Zealand, and now Flight Centre Canada is celebrating an incredible milestone, 30 years of helping Canadians explore the globe. From their first store in Vancouver in 1995 to becoming the official travel agency partner of the Toronto Raptors this year, they've been at the forefront of delivering travel experiences. At Flight Centre, travel is more than a passion. It's their expertise. From flights and accommodations to cruises and tours and even business travel, they handle it all. Whether it's crafting a tailor-made trip or tackling group bookings, they've got you covered. Plus, with exclusive perks like their new Bundle and Save, $500 on tour and cruise packages, there's never been a better time to plan your getaway. From the smallest getaways to the biggest bucket list trips, your travel goals are just a call or a click away. Visit flightcentre.ca/travel trends to explore the latest deals, learn about emerging travel trends, and start planning your next trip. And now, back to the show. Now, let's continue our guided travel series by focusing on Explore. Now, Explore has just opened an office in Toronto for North America, led by Katie Rocket and the amazing team there. But they are a global company. As you'll hear, they're the 3rd largest adventure travel globally. And Michael Edwards was the ideal person to bring in this conversation to highlight adventure travel and how Explore stacks up in the world of multi-day guided travel. So let's welcome Michael into the conversation. Michael Edwards, great to speak to you again. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks, Dan. It's great to be on. Hopefully we can add some value, and I can certainly talk to you about the joys of small group travel as part of that multi-day touring mix.
Yeah, no, that's terrific. And clearly from that introduction, people got a bit of sense of your background. Obviously, we've worked together before, and you're based in London, of course. So that's where I'm finding you today. So why don't you actually start off and give everyone a brief overview from your perspective of Explore worldwide?
Yeah, so Explore's been around 44 years this year. So one classic pioneer in the space, one of the big UK, owner-operated back in the day, though that's no longer the case. So you go back 44 years, owner-operator, starts it pretty small, pretty niche, grows pretty quickly, and now sort of mature in the UK, very mature market for experiential small group travel, which Explore led the way. We're still pretty big in our space and now growing globally as well. But we've really ridden that wave of pioneering the category to now seeing the maturation of that category and us being hopefully quite a big part of that.
Yeah, no, it's an exciting time for this space, and given the trends that we both are across in terms of the size of the market and the expansion over the next 5 or 10 years, which is obviously one of the reasons that we really wanted to not only have this conversation, but do this deep dive into the multi-day tour, which many people saw as kind of a fading category. But if anything, and not only is that undergoing a renaissance, we're seeing great growth. And you are kind of the 3rd largest small group adventure tour operator globally and growing. Tell everyone a little bit about your background, though. So I know we work together. But how did you get into travel? How did you specifically get into adventure travel, and then ultimately take on this role at Explore?
Yeah, like a lot of people in travel, it wasn't a career pathway. Kind of floundering around the world, enjoying being a participant in, being a traveler. Found my way into in the first wave of digital back in that first wave when the internet was kind of being invented. Managed to get myself a digital job, and back then a digital job was probably a bit like an AI job or a cryptocurrency job now, quite a rare species. So I managed to get a job as the Flight Center Global Digital Consultant, whatever that meant, Dan. So, but it was a good place to be. So that was my entry into travel. Flew around the world, pontificating around what digital meant for a traditional retailer. This is going back 20 odd years now. And then through that, I worked my way into the adventure space, the experiential space. That small group thing was the one which really interested me that most, that community-minded, off the beaten track, sort of responsible travel type thing. So through various roles, I made my way to G Adventures, based in very close to home for you. And it's where we met, Dan. 3 or 4 years at G, running the UK European business, and then 6 years at Intrepid. And there I ran the UK and Europe again. But my last role there was a global chief officer, so responsible for sales and marketing and digital globally. A really great time, really seeing how a company grows from being sort of a specialist to a mainstream brand, and now, what's fast becoming probably a household brand, and I thoroughly expect it to be in the next couple of years. And also through that period where becoming a B Corp became more prevalent and more important, that notion of being a purpose-led business. And through that, found my way to Explore. So it's fair to say Explore, fantastic business, great legacy, but it perhaps hadn't grown as significantly, as substantially as maybe the G Adventures or the Intrepids of this world, but it had all the capability to do so. So I came in kind of a remit to give it that identity, give it a global footprint, and really take it through what I see as over the next maybe 3 to 5, even longer. I'd call a bit of a golden age for small group travel. We could have talked about, will it be a narrowing category? Well, I see it as a bit of a golden age for the category for a number of reasons. So I feel like I'm well placed to take Explore on the next, whatever 43 years looks like.
Yeah, I definitely agree. Having known you, worked with you, and also, clearly Explore is very lucky to have you leading that brand globally for a couple of reasons. You just highlighted your background with 2 of the major players, but also being based in the UK market. Obviously I'm based in Toronto, and there's the major English language markets, Australia, New Zealand, the US, Canada, even South Africa. There is huge growth to be had in those markets, but the UK specifically, because I know that, and it's some of the things I want to get into in terms of the different markets and where you're seeing growth, having you based in London, because one of the things, as I understand, Katie Rocket, who's heads up North America for you, who is a friend of mine as well, and she's based here in Toronto, and obviously you guys are expanding globally, but you've got a great strength in the UK and in Europe with your brand, but there is still massive opportunity for you to be able to grow that brand globally. But before we get into that, I want to highlight from your perspective this golden age and why you see it occurring. So if we think about adventure travel or the rise of small group tours, what are you specifically seeing as the reason for the surge in activity and this golden age? What are the things that have stood out to you that you've positioned this business to expand and grow?
Yeah, I think there's probably 3 or 4 core points. I've never actually written these down, but I think if I look at it, I analyze it, having been in this space for a long time, I think there's kind of a convergence of 3 or 4 things happening at the moment. One is, and it's not the main feature, but it's definitely an important one, is this notion of responsible travel. Climate change, doing travel in a way that's less carbon intensive and similarly is beneficial for the communities in which it travels. So that notion of purpose-led travel. I don't think it's the primary reason, but I do think it's the reason that it makes this type of travel attractive for an increasingly broad group of people. I think the pandemic, as awful as it was, really sharpened the mind around valuing our freedoms and valuing experiences. And I think a lot of people came out of the pandemic who maybe hadn't done this style of travel before and saw it as a great way to, I hate the phrase, but really get into those, those not waiting, sitting around to do some of those bucket list experiences, the Machu Picchus and the Taj Mahals or the Antarcticas. And small groups offers a very good entry point for that. You travel with other people, you're led, you don't have to do all of the research yourself. It's very safe in terms of that perception of maybe traveling on your own, particularly for a first time or a less experienced traveler. The notion of having a tour leader who knows the region really well and can get you off the beaten track and into those sort of those experiences that may be harder to find on your own and really enhance the trip. I think the third one is a bit more intangible, but it's this idea of community. I think people in an increasingly fragmented world where the lens of social media is pretty prevalent, but can also be a bit overwhelming for people. It seems like everyone's out there having a great time, but you wouldn't know, right? Because we're all watching it behind our screens individually. So this idea of community, bringing community to life. And I think that's what small groups do. For a week, 10 days, 14 days, you're with 12 to 14 other travelers, like-minded people. It's what I would call, I've kind of coined this phrase that we're using internally. What we offer is, micro communities for a couple of weeks. You join 12 people. They may come from a slightly different background than you, slightly different age, but they share a similar thing. They want to connect with the planet. They want to have amazing experiences. They probably have some degree of wanting to travel in a more responsible, less carbon intensive way. They probably want to do some good or ensure that their tourist dollars do some good in the communities in which they travel. But most importantly, they like being part of a community that is experiencing something together rather than through the isolation of sharing it only by yourself through the medium of your tablet or your phone or whatever. So that one's a bit intangible, but I think it's a really strong factor.
We'll be right back. Did you know that over 20% of people who purchase a ticket will upgrade to a refundable option when given the choice? By offering Refund Protect, you make it easy for your customers to protect their ticket purchase against emergency circumstances like illness, injury, accidents, and more. Whether you're an airline, hotel group, tour operator, ticketing platform, OTA, or transport solution, when you partner with Protect Group, your customers get peace of mind and you generate extra revenue. With a Trustpilot score of 4.8 stars and over 31,000 reviews, they treat your customers as their own, earning the highest customer ratings in the industry. To find out more, check out Protect Group at protect.group. That's protect.group. Hey, travel advisors, are you ready to offer your clients truly amazing global travel experiences that they will never forget? Well, then you have to meet our friends at Colette, the most trusted name in guided travel since 1918. With tours across all 7 continents and 5 distinct travel styles, from small groups to small ship cruising, Colette really has a tour for every kind of traveler. Colette's in-destination designers are passionate travelers and regional experts. They curate experiences that go beyond the surface. Think dining in a local's home, connecting with local communities, and truly immersing yourself in the destination's culture. That is what Colette is all about. No cookie-cutter itineraries here. No endless hotel hopping. You'll spend an average of 2 to 3 nights in a centrally located accommodation. It is the way to travel in 2025 and beyond. So it is time to make sure your clients have the opportunity to experience Colette. Don't just book a trip. Dive deeper into the destination. Create memories with Colette. Travel crafted by travelers for travelers. For more information and to discover how Colette can delight your clients, check out Colette.com. That's Colette, COLLETTE.com. Are you looking for ways to grow your travel business through paid media and optimized SEO? Then you have to check out our friends at Propellic.com. They are the leading digital agency for growth in travel and tourism. Propellic offers bold digital marketing strategies to ensure your travel company's success. They have a remarkable methodology that has actually been implemented by TravelAI.com, and they are a leading SEO agency globally and offer a range of resources, a podcast of their own, a blog on their website, Propellic.com. That's Propellic.com. And don't forget to mention Travel Trends for your free marketing audit. Now, back to the show. Well, let's talk about that small group element because clearly we share a passion for that travel style, and the brands we've highlighted and we've both worked with in the past, there is a commonality in terms of the idea that rather than being on a large coach with 50 plus people, where some of these brands are maximizing yield and therefore trying to make sure these coaches are operating full, there are, of course, operators that still operate coaches, but fill them to half capacity or offer more premium options. It was interesting when I spoke to James Thornton, obviously, James well from Intrepid, and I asked him, is there any interest of Intrepid getting into coach tours? And he said, absolutely not. Yeah, exactly. One of our partners on our podcast is Colette, a great company. They actually they've seen a significant growth in small group. It's literally like up 70% year over year. And so some of those companies have been able to successfully reinvent themselves or expand in new categories to introduce small group. Given it so well, and you were just highlighting that, these small groups are essentially a tribe that travels together. Tell everyone, because a number of our listeners, I'm sure in this series, are maybe familiar with the multi-day tour market. As you and I can both agree, there's probably not a great terminology for this category. Of course, Tour Radar calls it organized adventures. Everyone has a slightly different, and it's not just purely adventure travel. But tell us a little bit more about small group itself, just to give us an overview of that experience from your point of view and why you think, obviously you've mentioned sustainability, there is still significant growth to be had, especially for 50 plus travelers, because I know you've introduced some new premium options as well. So take everyone through.
Let's look, and I'm not surprised James gave that answer, and I can categorically give you the same answer, because we believe that the small group experience is the optimal one for a number of reasons. And I'll try and break this down. Firstly, you're with a relatively small group of people, 12, 14, 16, maybe, max 16 on most trips. And you're there for maybe a week or two. That gives you time to get to know people pretty deeply, right? Whereas if you're with 50 people, you might get to know a few people, but it's a bit limiting, similarly can be a bit overwhelming. You might get some service level relationships built in those couple of weeks. But with 16 people guided by a tour leader, it's pretty intimate. The experience is pretty intimate. You spend a lot of time together. As I say, you probably have similar interests or curiosities about the world. So by its very nature, it lends itself well to that dynamic, that small tribe that you talk to, and people by and large, people like being part of a tribe, right? It's sense of place, sense of community, sense of belonging. And I think we provide that. I think the other thing small groups do is make the world very accessible. If the logistics of once you go up to those 50s or bigger numbers, can you go to that small local restaurant? Can it facilitate serving 50 people at a sitting? Is it good for that community to have that kind of tourism go through it? So you can get to smaller places, you can get to more intimate places. It just gives you more agility to, if there's something new, and we give our tour leaders latitude, if there are new experiences, asking 50 people to do a slight detour because this amazing new restaurant or this ceramics workshop has opened. Very hard to get 50 people to, the consensus of 50 people is pretty hard to reach. 12, 14 travelers with pretty similar views and interests, pretty easy to have that adaptability. And I think people like that. It really does. That off the beaten track. Are you ever really off the beaten track these days? Probably only in fairly extreme circumstances. But you can still have very unique experiences in very familiar places if you've got the ability and the knowledge to get to those places. And I think it lends itself really well to that. And I think in the past, this notion of small group has been a little bit, it's all about the destination and not about the accommodation or the way you travel. And I think that's changed. People want better accommodation and they want better modes of travel and more comfortable vehicles, but they still want to have that same visceral sort of immersion into people and place. But we've recognized as the category goes, we do have to cater to people's travel needs. You mentioned earlier, we've introduced an upgraded range, so you can do most of our tours or a growing number of tours in, slightly more upgraded, more comfortable accommodations. So our category is moving towards, I think the traveler's moving towards us and we're moving towards that traveler in some way so that we can cater to make the category more accessible for people. But I think it's that real community aspect and that agility and ability to get into a place into people and place in a way that you just can't do in a big group.
Yeah. And obviously one of the reasons I'm a big advocate is that part of what you described, that sense of community. And if you were to close your eyes and open them again and be on an explore trip and look around at your group, describe to us the type of individuals that are attracted to the small group. In your instance, I mean, and just as a caveat too, I was asking James kind of a similar question about the demographics, because most people think adventure, it's 20 or 30 somethings. And, his number one category is like a 45-year-old solo female, and then a 60 plus couple. And the third audience for them. So is someone in their 20 or 30 somethings. And also something that I'm sure you'll agree with is much more of a psychographic than a demographic, is that even though there may be an age difference between some of your guests, the reality is that they are all seeking a similar experience, the cultural immersion. And I always find it amazing that like a 25-year-old gets along with a 60-year-old on these trips, and you develop really fascinating friendships and have really thoughtful discussions. That's one of the things that always stood out to me.
That range of people, Dan, you've summarized it really well. And sometimes a phrase feels like a marketing term or a piece of terminology, but in this case, it's not. It definitely is a psychographic, not a demographic. We probably index around the age of about 57, but we think of our sweet spot as between 40 and 60. We've got some people up the younger side of 40, and certainly people the older side of 60. But what brings them together is that shared desire to see the world with fellow curious, like-minded people. And that age is not a barrier to that, in my opinion. And I see it time and time again. I've traveled widely on our trips and on competitor trips and in previous roles. And you see that makeup. I don't think I've been on a trip where you haven't had in a group of people somebody at that younger age spectrum and somebody at that older spectrum. And you don't get many opportunities in the real world to have those shared relationships. In a work world, stereotypically, an older person is more likely to be your boss, or it is common ground where you're there for a common reason. And, you put people together out in an environment in which they're all sharing a similar thing, then it breaks down those barriers. And that dynamic is incredible to see. So you said, if I close my eyes, and what would I see? I would see lots of female solo travelers. And I think let's just break down solo because it's an interesting one. There's safety reasons, and traveling in a group is safer, or perceived to be safer, and those things. But what we're seeing with solo travels, in particular female solo travelers, is it's not that perhaps stereotype, hackneyed notion of people are on their own, so they need to find other people to travel with. It's that they maybe have lifestyle differences or time in their life that's different than their friends or family. We get lots of solo travelers who are married or in relationships, or they have partners. They just have different interests. Or, those 20s or 30, you remember your 20, 30, we travel with our friends, right? But increasingly, as you get older, your friends aren't always available at the same time as you, right? So a small group offers an entry point into being able to do something that you don't want to wait for others to be available for, knowing that you will probably travel with somebody that you're going to get on with, and with that small tribe of people. So I think that's why we're seeing a huge rise in solo travel. People, certainly post-pandemic, people just don't want to wait for these experiences, right? If you have your freedoms curtailed for a couple of years, you really value your freedoms when you get them back, and people want to maximize their time. I don't know how long that's going to last, but I'm not seeing any end to that. I feel it in myself. I want to make the most of every minute I've got, because my generation has certainly never had their freedoms curtailed before, and it was a real eye-opener.
Yeah, for sure. No, and I think it's a 10-year horizon given demographic factors, but given the global nature of your business, where are you seeing the growth? And clearly, obviously we're talking mainly about English language markets, since it's primarily English language tours, but where are you seeing the growth in 2025? What are the markets that are standing out to you, or that you're prioritizing, that you think have the greatest potential for growth in adventure travel and for explore?
Yeah, and it would be fascinating to have this conversation in 10 years, because I suspect the world will have changed hugely, particularly in this space. But right now, look, and I make no bones about it, we're a UK business, that's our base, and that's where we've been. And we hadn't done such a good job, particularly given how passionate we are about our style of travel, of expanding into other markets. You know, we'd had some GSA arrangements. So we are very focused on North America and Australasia at the moment. And the reason for that is in Australia, it's a very mature market for our type of travel. They get it. Australians and New Zealanders are comfortable traveling our way. And you don't have the language barriers, you know, that commonality. I think there will be an opportunity for bringing other languages in or running tours in other languages, and we can maybe touch on that in a minute. And the second one is North America, because I think it's not just the size of the market. You always talk about market opportunity size. You've still got to have the right product and the right marketing strategy and the right price point. So that it's not the size of the market. I think it's the readiness of the market to embrace this style of travel. I think Canadians, and sorry if I offend anyone who might be listening, I think Canadians have maybe been on this journey a bit longer than North Americans. I'm generalizing a bit, but I think Canadians have traveled a bit more in this style more than North Americans. Apologies to those North Americans that get it and do it. We love you and we enjoy having you on our tours. But I think in North America, we're seeing a real understanding of this being a viable travel option, that small group, you know, it's a great way to get out and see the world. And I think there is a shift towards this style of travel and understanding of and it's been trailblazed by some of our competitors. And that's, you know, but the category, I think, has got lots of headroom for a few more operators, particularly those who've been doing it for some time, who are passionate about it and can offer really good product and authenticity around their purpose-led piece. So, but then beyond that, I do see Europe and then increasingly parts of Asia and South America. You know, it's just that you have to choose your markets, you know, and your growth strategies. You know, you have to be fairly disciplined around those. But I can certainly see a time where we will move into other markets.
Well, tell us then, there's two aspects to this, of course. There's your source market, and then there's the destinations you're sending them to. And, you know, we've talked before that, you know, G Adventures focused on, you know, Peru and South America, and Intrepid, when the world was kind of almost divided in half, they were focused on Southeast Asia. Clearly, both are global. Remind us and where Explore got their start in terms of the destinations you're primarily focused on. Obviously, you talked about being a UK centric company, given your history, but yeah, what were the destinations you were primarily sending travelers to? And I guess what are your core markets that you are still, you know, is where the majority of your bookings happen? And then where else are you seeing growth? Where else are you expanding to? Because I know you've got a number of new trips for 2025.
Yeah. I mean, back 43 years ago, we were that classic English traveler. You know, there was lots of India and Pakistan and, you know, those kind of places that have always been kind of pioneer travel places for the British. And then as we sort of perfected the model or improved on the model and more customers understood it, we branched out. So like most companies, we pretty much travel it everywhere now. You know, any given year, probably about, you know, between 400 and 600 different tours or tour type variations of tours. And we cover most of the globe. We've always kept a bit of a pioneering spirit. We always look to get back into a destination if that destination's not been, you haven't been able to travel there for a while, or we want to pioneer new destinations, knowing that you probably won't get that volume of travelers, but you'll get that pioneering spirit of traveler that remains true to the DNA of the business and true to the DNA of the spirit of the type of traveler that we've always attracted, you know. So Saudi Arabia is a great example. You can debate the politics of Saudi Arabia till the cows come home, and like most of us in this space, we believe travel opens up. So we don't look at the politics. We think it's a bridge, you know, is a bit of an antidote to some of those things. So we launched Saudi Arabia a couple of years ago, probably the first operator of our sort of size to get back into Saudi Arabia. And it's been a big seller for us, one of our best sellers. And interestingly, a big seller out of North America. It jumped into our top 5 at the end of last year for North American travelers. And I think that's because, you know, lots is written about it or has been written about it, but very little is known by the actual traveler, right? So anywhere you have a destination like that, where there's still a sense of what's it really like, a sense of wonder, I want to see it for myself, that perception gap and having the ability to go in there and see it for yourself, those places always remain fascinating for people.
Yeah, it's really interesting. Obviously, we talked a bit about the the markets that you are focused on, a little bit about some of the destinations, and some detail, obviously, small group adventures themselves. The part I would love to understand that I don't familiar with Explore, even though we've known each other well, I'm familiar with the brand, is how you sell the difference of Explore versus other adventure travel companies or other multi-day tour companies. Clearly, there's a huge difference between small group and coach, and there's a market for coach. I mean, obviously, there still is a large market for coach tours, right?
Yeah, there is.
When you are positioning Explore against all of those competitors and trying to convince people to take an Explore trip, what are, I guess, your USPs, your unique selling proposition? I mean, these are I've gone through the website, so I kind of I have an instinct, but I really would love to hear it from you. Like, what is the difference? How do you sell the difference on Explore?
Look, I'd love to sit here and tell you there were 10 distinct differences, Dan. But what I will say is, if you look at the 3 or 4 bigger players, us and Intrepid and G and Exodus, we do pretty similar stuff, right? But we've been small companies, right? In the grand, if you look at us as a category within travel, we still are relatively small, certainly getting bigger, and the likes of Intrepid doing a great job of turning, becoming a mainstream business. So it's been small. So it's not surprising that we do similar things, right? Because we've grown the market together. And because we're also passionate about what we do, and you can every business owner or business leader will come on here and tell you they're passionate about their business, but there are no businesses I've worked in where the people that design, build, operate, run, market the product are as passionate about the thing that they sell. So there's a shared passion in the industry. So your differences really come down to perhaps those things were in their company DNA. So for us, it was always that pioneer spirit. So we'll always perhaps put on those pioneer destinations. They won't be the core of our business and they won't bring home the majority of our revenue, but we'll always seek to do the Saudi Arabias and the Pakistans and the Togos and I'd love to get trips to, Papua New Guinea. It's not going to happen anytime soon, but we've always got the team looking to get back into or discover those places that feel like you're really, really discovering something for the first time. I think the second one is we don't perhaps, with that psychographic thing, we do really stay sort of closer to our 40 to 60 range. We welcome travelers either side of that, but we're not trying to play every age group on the spectrum. So there's maybe a clearer sense to a traveler that Explore might be a bit suitable for me. So if I'm 50, I'm going to be with some 40-year-olds, I'm going to be with some 60-year-olds and a few people either side of that. But it is going to be a slightly narrower demographic but still pretty broad. Whereas most of our competitors have something in the younger range and something in that older range. And where we're saying, and then the differentiation, I think, comes down to we pride ourselves on service. You'll always get a human when you speak to us. That's true of most of the companies in our space. But having done it for 43 years, I think that's one of the things that sets us apart. But I would be wrong, and I've worked for those businesses, and they're all great businesses. I like that there aren't huge differences because this is the style of travel we believe in. And this is the style of travel we would like people to take in the future, right? We think it's good for the planet. We think it's good for the communities in which we travel. So I don't mind that there's a bit of overlap in what we do at this particular point in time.
Yeah. Well, what I found interesting when you mentioned like the 4 reasons initially about Explore, you mentioned about responsible travel.
Yeah.
And I wanted to dive into that a bit further, just in terms of clarifying for our listeners or potential customers or travel advisors that might be selling Explore, how important that is, and then how you deliver on that, because it's always the question of like how sustainable is the style of travel. People have to fly to destinations, so I'm keen to know Explore's approach to sustainability and responsible travel.
Yeah. And look, sustainability, responsible travel, it's a much used, possibly misunderstood or miscommunicated word in some ways. And we see it in 2 ways. So sustainable and responsible, I'll come to the carbon bit and climate stuff second, because that's the harder bit, obviously. So from a responsible, sustainable point of view, we genuinely believe that by taking small numbers of people to communities, keeping that money in the markets in which we travel, keeping it close to those communities, trying not to spend it on multinationals, etc., supporting people and projects where we go. That sustainability, tourism is, as we all know, a massive part of GDP particularly in lots of these developing countries. So you can do some real good in terms of bringing people in a responsible way through those destinations. The flip side, and the side that gets the most attention, is, we sell tours in every country in the world, and most of them need a long haul flight to get there, right? And you cannot shy away from that in any way, shape, or form. And that problem has not been solved, but we take it on board. We don't want people to not travel. Dan, I grew up in that generation where it was relatively easy to travel, so I traveled a lot, and it helped me form who I am as a person and how I think about the world and how I raise my daughter. And it's been nothing but beneficial. But I do recognize every time I get on a plane, I'm emitting carbon into the air, and I think carefully about how many times I do that and how far I go and how frequently I do it. So what do? We do everything we can without necessarily being able to solve the elephant in the room, which is ultimately we don't yet have planes that are sustainable, or policies or whatever they are, governance around ensuring that that's that the airlines are forced to do more than they're doing now. So what we do is, in a simple sense, every tour we run, we try and decrease the carbon intensity per passenger every year. And that will be through, with the supply chain, making sure the hotels have certain practices around waste and water, plastics, etc. The transport we use, moving to more hybrid coaches and electric coaches in the future. And then obviously the big one is internal flights. Historically, a lot of internal flights on our trips. So we've removed hundreds of those in the last few years. So we have a carbon intensity score. It's, we work with an external partner. I think we were one of the first, if not the first, to carbon label every single trip and be transparent about that, and work with scientific targets and have that audited. And so that's part of our KPIs internally. I'm KPI, part of my bonus, for example, is based on that. It's not just about profit for us. If I don't bring down the carbon intensity per passenger on our trips, in some way I'm not meeting my KPIs, and I don't get remunerated as well as I would have done if I don't achieve those goals. So it's riven through the whole business. So all of my management team are also aligned to those targets. And then the other thing is we'll try new things. We've moved from offsetting to sort of investing in carbon capture projects. We don't think offsetting is the way to go anymore. So our business has spent about 250,000 last year, that's UK pounds, on working with climate.com on carbon capture projects. We now give our customers the ability to buy sustainable aviation fuels, SAFs. We don't think any of these things are magic bullets, Dan, and we'll get some of them wrong, and but we will explore every avenue to do two things. One is keep travel alive for people, because we genuinely have a fundamental belief that it enriches you and a person and makes you think about the world in a different way that can only be beneficial to this sustainability debate down the track. And secondly, we genuinely believe us and other companies are really contributing to those communities in which we travel. And if we pulled back on all of that, nobody wins. We may all lose, who knows, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
But we'd rather give it every shot to maintain that wonder of travel and the good that it does for the places in which we travel to.
Yeah, it's interesting. I didn't realize that your incentive scheme was also based on sustainability. That's actually fascinating to know, because that's where getting to the root of it, like how committed are these companies to delivering against this. So I'm glad you actually you called that out, because I think that's what the travelers really understand about the tour operators that they're choosing. So I appreciate your perspective on sustainability. I guess the part I'm also keen to understand is we talked a little bit about the destinations you go to, and I know you mentioned Saudi Arabia. One of the other ones, I didn't realize you had such a great strength in Africa. I know you have Ghana trips now, and even Togo, which is really fascinating, like Western Africa, but parts of the world that I think maybe it's the case that you have British travelers that are more interested in going to those destinations, and hopefully more Americans or North Americans or Australians as well. But tell us about I guess some of those unique itineraries that you offer, like what's new for 2025. And the other thing I'm also keen to get your take on is one thing I've seen working closely with ATTA and being at their event last year is like this huge rise in cycling travel, like this people pursuing hiking and cycling. It just seems to be like there's an insatiable demand. So it's, you're often finding these new destinations because there's great cycle paths or great hiking. So yeah, tell us about some of the new trips, I guess.
I'd like to think some of the cycling growth is mirrored in Peloton's declining growth. I'd like to think it's real cycling than sort of cycling in your living room during a pandemic.
Well, yeah. Well, actually, just I have to quickly say on that point, Michael, the part that actually really made me laugh when I was learning about all these cycling trips taking off. The reason for it is because it's electric bikes, right?
It is, yeah.
So it's more of a pleasure cruise now than it is, the Tour de France.
You still pedal, Dan. You still pedal. So
yeah, you look like you're cycling, but you could. What a few of these operators had highlighted to me is that it opens up a lot of people that wouldn't otherwise consider a cycling tour. So that's obvious, yes. But it means you can travel greater distances over the course of a day.
It does. But the point you make there about cycling and accessibility is actually similarly true for something like Africa as a destination, right? It is about accessibility. So let's come back to the Africa thing. I'm fascinated by Western Africa. It's never had a huge volume of travelers, and there's been logistical issues in the past. Lots of visa requirements, infrastructure, direct flights, indirect flights. It's been a hard place to travel to, and it has been some instability in some of those countries, not all of them, but lots of visa changes, lots of logistical changes, lots of regime changes, airlines not necessarily committing to having routes in there at frequency and volume. So, and that's an accessibility thing. So when you want to be a bit more of a pioneer, you've got to kind of overcome some of those logistical things and do the work to make it accessible for people. And hopefully you pioneer those destinations to a degree that you help support the infrastructure, the understanding of tourism and the importance that it can bring. And some of those barriers start to move away. And we've seen that in other parts of Africa. And, even a really well touristed country Morocco 20 years ago doesn't see anything like this. So tourism has partly driven those infrastructure changes and those accessibility things. And we'd like to think the same could happen in some of those less frequently visited parts of the world. So hopefully we can lead the way in making it a bit more accessible. Ethiopia is a great example. It's a really popular destination for us, and it's a lot more accessible. Rwanda is another one that's becoming really popular, and it's fascinating. I personally haven't been. Everything I hear from our product team and the guys that have been, just an amazing place. All these places are, right? So, but it's that accessibility thing. So similarly with cycling, electric bikes have made it that style of travel more accessible for more people. There is, in my opinion, aren't many better ways. There's two ways I think. I'm a cyclist from way back, cycled halfway around the world. There's two ways I like seeing the world. It's from a train, because you're traveling through a community, you're traveling with people from that country. It gets you into the heart of a town or a village, and you feel a sense of travel when you're doing it. Similarly with cycling, you've got no barrier. You're propelling yourself. You're out in the open air, and you're getting from A to B under your own steam, albeit supported by a little bit of electricity these days. So I think that's taken away the barrier for people. And then people do it for the first time. They experience the electric. Not everyone travels on an electric bike. You sometimes get the choice. But if I'm less mobile or less fit, or I'm not a keen cyclist, to suddenly be able to do that style of travel in a way that is just such an immersive, wonderful way to do it, it's that accessibility issue. And I think that's why we're seeing cycling and active. And again, you have to think link back to the pandemic, right? We were stuck indoors. Everyone baked sourdough and got super fit for 2 weeks and drank until 3 a.m. But hey, you can do all of those things on holiday, right? So I think active is also linked to that. Hey, we were stuck indoors and we saw a big rise in people buying bikes and jogging and all of those things. So I think there's some linkage there. But I think people want to experience the destination, but they want to feel like they're doing it in a way that's more relevant to them and more immersive. And cycling certainly offers that. And I think that category is just going to keep growing, in my opinion.
We'll be right back. Hey, Travel Trends listeners, I've got a question for you. How much money is your website actually leaving on the table right now? One of our episode sponsors, Stay22, has just dropped a new tool that's kind of a no-brainer, and it's called the Stay22 Revenue Calculator. It shows you in seconds how much you could be earning with their AI-powered monetization tech. No extra ads, no clutter, just clean additional revenue. Publishers are already seeing up to 40% more RPM without changing their setup. So go check out stay22.com/travel trends and hit revenue calculator. That's stay22.com/travel trends and check out their revenue calculator. You might be leaving more on the table than you think. Attention travel operators, destination management companies, and accommodation providers. Managing payments doesn't have to be a source of stress. Meet Flywire, the modern payments platform built specifically for the unique needs of the travel industry. With Flywire, you can collect payments from travelers worldwide with ease. Enjoy faster payouts in your preferred currency, reduce payment fees, and offer your guests flexible, localized payment options they're familiar with. Not only does Flywire simplify your operations, but it also helps elevate your guest experience and boost your bottom line. That means you can stop worrying about payments and focus on what you do best, creating unforgettable travel experiences. Discover how Flywire can help your business save time, save money, and deliver truly seamless transactions. Visit flywire.com/travel trends to learn more. That's flywire.com/travel trends. In today's fast-paced travel industry, businesses face constant challenges, keeping up with new technologies, meeting ever-evolving customer expectations, and promoting products effectively. The real struggle? Managing it all in-house. That's where Travel Tech steps in to transform your business. With over 25 years of experience, Travel Tech is one of the most trusted names in travel technology, offering tailored solutions to fit your unique needs. They make it easy to create seamless, bookable websites, manage and promote products, and automate everyday tasks, giving your team more time to focus on what matters most, your customers. Plus, Travel Tech is the go-to name in cruise technology with cutting-edge solutions for tour operators as well. Plus, Travel Tech has just launched Tech Talk, a new podcast for travel professionals by travel professionals. Explore the stories behind the biggest innovations in travel. Visit traveltech.com/travel trends or tune in to Tech Talk on Spotify and Apple. That's traveltech.com/travel trends and Tech Talk on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. And now, back to the show. What's your vision over the next 5 years for both Explore and the adventure category in general? How much of what we see today will remain true? And where do we think we'll see the innovation? Clearly in destinations, that's a big one. And style of travel, we've talked about those. So clearly that's going to continue to evolve.
I don't think the product will change massively because it's still got a long way to go. I think what you'll see is a deepening of the product. So if you go back 10 years, we would maybe offer sort of, you'd go to India in the same way as you go to South Africa, country in South Africa or country in South America, something like that. But now, you can go to Vietnam and you can do cycling, you can do food, you can do upgraded, so it's that sort of going to a country, but doing it in a way that suits a particular interest you might have. So that deepening of destination and the way you travel, that will definitely continue to go. I think we'll see in our space a move to more upgraded and premium and maybe even touching luxury at some point because accommodation never used to be a factor. People just wanted to see the destination. So I think now that people are used to, perhaps through the rise of Airbnb and particularly in our age demographic, that 40 to 60, they've got a bit more disposable income. There's no crime in wanting to do it with a bit of comfort, right? So I think we'll see that continue to expand. I think this notion of community will only grow and grow and grow. I think social media isn't going anywhere, and it's such an enabler and an inspiring thing, but it also can be quite an isolating thing. So if you can find if you can be the middle ground or the sort of the bridge between that sort of somewhat isolation and somewhat inspiration, that to me can be a quite powerful thing. And I think we'll talk increasingly about community and micro communities and tribes as, we are a travel company, but I'm increasingly seeing us as a company that creates community. I think you'll see that. The technology piece is going to be fascinating. And I think travel has never, correct me if I'm wrong, Dan, you may never been at the forefront of technology. No, but I think there's finally technologies that are coming and emerging, and particularly with AI, that travel companies can properly harness for the first time in perhaps a way that they haven't taken the advantage of in other technology advancements. AI is so powerful for what we do because I don't think anything will replace that wanting to be on a community, right? So that AI, I don't think, and I could be sitting here in 10 years and you may not be talking to the Michael Edwards Explore bot MD and it'll do a far better job for me. And that's fine. That's the way the world evolves, right? But I think people are going to want human connections. And I think small group is particularly well placed it does it now. And I think it'll increasingly play that part going forward if we continue to offer great product. But what AI can do is give the customer a better experience going into that pre-trip. Knowledge. We've got AI now built into our customer service telephone systems. We're learning from the customer. We're being able to serve them up with knowledge and information and data and answers and better ways of giving them the information they need. It makes it quicker for our team so they can focus on that human aspect. What inspires you? How can I help you? What's the trip going to be like? Who are you going to meet? How are you going to feel? How can we make it better for you? So those things, and from a marketing point of view, the thing that I'd like to see change in the next 10 years, and I hope we see this change, and we make no bones about this, we haven't done a great job in this space, is we're talking about this rise of small group travel, right? But we're talking about broadly, middle class, English speaking, generally, not particularly diverse group of people going on these trips. And I would like to see that change. I would like to think in 10 years' time, our style of travel is not just open, but is a real option for people from more diverse cultures and languages. And one of the limitations to that is your marketing, right? You market, if people pick up a brochure and they see 16 similar looking people, you're not going to think that trip's for you. And in the past, that's been, you have to do photo shoots and in-country video, and it's onerous and it's resource heavy. So you might want to move the diversity dial a little bit, but how do you move that into your marketing in a way that also is balanced along with sort of meeting your financial goals? Whereas with tools like AI, I can see a time where we can replace a lot of that onerous, heavy lifting stuff around marketing, that we can really present this style of travel to a more diverse group of people. That to me would be truly exciting.
To exactly that point, as actually you and I both, not only have a great affinity for this style of travel, and you mentioned, a couple of times in our conversation that, this is a small industry, and when you look at the size of the cruise industry. And so one of the things I wanted to ask you, given your background, your expertise, and your position in the industry, is how can we make sure that more people come into the consideration set, whether it is a traveler right now that's listening to this, that's sitting on the fence about group or adventure travel, or travel advisors that just don't know enough about adventure and group travel. Clearly, one of the ways that we do that is familiarization trips, fam trips, as we call them, to get someone to have had that same aha moment that we've had. And you're like, oh my God, I want everyone to experience this style of travel. That's clearly how you and I both feel about it. But what are some of the other things that we can do together or as an industry so that we're not focused on the just shifting market share or that kind of zero sum game? There's only and focusing on the competition. We've talked about some of the other adventure travel companies, and really, if you look at the growth of them, everyone's seeing growth. So that's a fantastic position for us all to be in. The question is, like, how high can we go? How big is this opportunity?
I think we need to take ownership of it, Dan. We come on your podcast and other media outlets, and we talk about how passionate we are about this style of travel. And I genuinely believe, it's shaped who I am and what I believe as a human, and how I raise my family, and how the group of friends I have, and how I perceive the world politically, and all of those things. And for me, I've benefited hugely from that. I'm a lower working class kid. I don't come from a particularly privileged background, but I am privileged in the sense that I've been that generation of people that has been able to get out and see the world, even though that I haven't come, from a position of great wealth. That is a huge privilege, and it's helped shape me as a person. So if we talk about being truly purpose-led businesses, part of our mission, if we believe it, is to commit to that those other generations and other groups of people that perhaps don't have that same opportunity now. And is that, I don't know if that's programs, is it our marketing, is it how we position as itself, is it outreach programs, do we have to adapt our product? I would like to see more discussion on that as an industry, because as much as I love our industry, we do tend to talk about the same things in the same ways. And we're in a position where we are relatively small, and we say we're purpose-led, and I genuinely believe we are. We are in a position collectively to move the dial on some of this stuff, right? If we own it and we agree on it. And I don't know exactly what that looks like, but that's a debate and a discussion I would welcome. I don't want to be. I want this product. I want this style of travel to be open to everyone in the same way that travel was open to me from about the age of 18 onwards, because I know the profound impact it has. So internally, we do have we're a bit behind, in my opinion, but we are starting to put some real tangible goals around what that might look like in the next 2 years. And one of the things will be about marketing, about how we present our style of travel and who it's for. And, we'll step into that in a way that's hopefully not condescending, or we'll try and get the balance right, because there is a risk that you make it less accessible. So it's a bit of a minefield, and we've got to get that right. But similarly, we've got to bring more diverse people in to work with us, right? Because if you have to say, and one of the great things about the pandemic is we're not, our business doesn't function from a single location anymore. We've got hubs around the world. We've got people from much more broad nationalities and backgrounds working for us now. So that's the big opportunity for me. My access to talent and a diverse ways of thinking are so much broader than they were pre-pandemic. So if I look about my company, I think we'll double easily in the next 5-10 years. Certainly in the next 5 years, I think we'll double, and then sky's the limit, I think. So, but that is reliant on bringing in a different way of thinking into your business, right? To keep going through those step changes or barriers to changing the way you do business and who you do it for. A bit of a long-winded answer because I don't have all the answers down. Just a passion to get there, I think, is coming across.
For sure. And the one thing I'd love to ask you on this exact topic, because one of the most powerful ways we can inspire people to travel is through our travel stories.
Yeah.
And with Tony Maureen Wheeler, who I had the pleasure to work with at Lonely Planet for many years, they would always ask them this question that used to frustrate me when I'd hear journalists or media ask, like, tell us like something that terrible that happened on your trip, and or something that happened. Did you get robbed? Or did you get mugged? And Maureen was like, we've never had a bad experience. Like, she was just like, it's because people try to instantly go to the negative or the reasons not to leave your home. And so I find that travel stories, and clearly it's in our DNA, we're storytellers. And when we share stories, it inspires other people to travel.
Yeah,
so
for sure.
I would love to hear, if you wouldn't mind sharing with us, one of your favorite travel stories or memories.
You've got me, Dan, because I was going to tell you a story where bad stuff happened, but ultimately it was amazing stuff because it was about the human spirit, right? So yeah. I was very luckily fortunate enough to do the Sydney to Hobart many years ago, the famous yacht race from Sydney to Hobart that takes off from Boxing Day from Sydney Harbour all the way down to Tasmania. It's a race. I don't know how I managed to wangle my way onto it. I'm not much of a sailor. But it was catastrophic that year. Huge storms. I was in the middle of those storms. And sadly, I think from memory, about 6 people died. And I think the worst race in terms of the history of that race. And to be in those storms is surreal and terrifying at the same time. But coming into Tasmania a couple of days later, and we went to some a couple of the funerals and some services, that human spirit you hear when you're out at sea is, you could hear all these boats, and I was lying in my bunk with what's called the race scared, and you could hear all the boats talking to each other, and that connectivity we didn't feel safe necessarily, but you were connected by, why are we out here on the ocean doing this in the middle of the storm, right? And that sense of, I just want to push myself. I want to do something outside of my comfort zone. I want to have a shared experience with somebody else. And what I remember, what I take away from that is not that I was in a big storm. It's that I had this amazing shared experience that now binds me to, in some tangible, intangible, strong with a few people, barely tenuous with others. But we shared that same experience, and it will have equally formed something about us in some way, right, that binds us together. And for me, that's what we do, is about stepping into the world, right, in a way that you couldn't do many years ago. And we do, hopefully we step into that world in a certain way that makes it very accessible for you and beneficial for the places that you go. And for me, that's pretty powerful storytelling, right?
For sure. Yeah, that's great. No, and thanks for sharing that with us. Of course, yeah, the dramatic.
It's pretty dramatic, yeah. So
No, I appreciate you sharing that. And obviously, I've so enjoyed this discussion. Obviously, I value our friendship, and I'm so pleased and impressed to see your continued success. So I look forward to seeing you again when you're across, and seeing the team as I do regularly here in the Toronto office. But certainly, I want to make sure that everyone knows how to connect with you, how to find out more about Explore Worldwide. So point everyone in those directions, if you wouldn't mind, Michael.
So Explore Worldwide, explore.co.com. So in and .ca. Sorry, it's a global audience, and you can find me on LinkedIn. I'm very happy to talk to anyone who's got an interest in this space. Dan, I really appreciate you highlighting our sector. I know how passionate that's how we met. So we share a love of it, and it's great to be able to come on and talk about it and highlight it. I think if there's one thing that you and I share, it's a real passion for this sector and what we offer. So it's been great to be able to come on and talk about it.
Fantastic. Thank you so much again. Wishing you and the team every success in 2025 and beyond. Thanks again, Michael.
Thanks, Dan. Really appreciate it.
Thanks so much for joining us on this latest episode of Travel Trends. I hope you've been enjoying our deep dive into the world of guided travel. I certainly enjoyed reconnecting with Michael Edwards today and talking about Explore Worldwide and bringing adventure travel into this series on guided touring. Next week, we're going to be speaking to the head of AAT Kings, Ben Hall, who is also an old friend of mine that I worked with for nearly a decade at the Travel Corporation. He grew up through the Kentucky brand and went on to great success across the company, and ultimately moved back to Australia, where he's from, to lead one of the most iconic Australian multi-day tour companies, AAT Kings. So you can look forward to that conversation next week. And don't forget, we post clips and highlights on all our social channels, which you can find at Travel Trends Podcast on LinkedIn, on Instagram, and YouTube. And then we send out a monthly update of all of our latest episodes and our travel plans for the next month, which you can register for at traveltrendspodcast.com. And then don't forget, this series is brought to us by our sponsor, Tour Optima. You can find out more information at touroptima.com, or just email Ben at touroptima.com to set up a demo. Because if you have a day tour or multi-day tour company and are eager to have your guests delighted and come back and book more trips, then you need to learn about their white label app that will allow your guides to be able to connect with your guests to make sure they have the best possible experience with your brand. Now, until next week, safe travels.